founders have been unable to raise the initial risk capital to get them to where they need to be because of how they're positioning themselves in the market. There are also other things that are slightly more insidious about the venture capital asset class, which is the fact that it's not particularly diverse as an industry, and the amount of capital that goes to people who are different and underserved is really kind of shocking sometimes. So we sort of talk about the undesirable founder or the undesirable target consumer, etc. And even ourselves, we're on the back end sometimes of the hoof of the venture capital community, because they say to us, at a party, oh gosh, you run an impact fund. How do you make money? How do you make money from the underserved? And you're like, well, they're called women and they're half of the population and they tend to make most of the financial decisions in the household. So, that's how we do it. And then what we're really trying to do in your journey of getting you to a point where you're really attractive to just like standard venture capitalists is we're working with all of these amazing domain experts to get you to have like really specialist plug and play expertise, kind of like a hub and spoke model. And we're really democratizing our own performance as venture capitalists. Typically what has happened in other firms is partners take all of the carry, all of the performance on their network. And we're trying to just remunerate our network for helping you. And that's the sort of like TLDR of our business. We invest in all sorts of things. We consider ourselves the first check-in with some deals that are some now breakthrough companies. Another example is Andela. We're really looking for businesses where the driver of the business model is the impact. So it's like built into whatever the company is producing as a good and service. And then the like lovely long-term vision is that beyond just like the impact that's built into your business, we want to support you with ESG practices at the early stages so that your business grows and evolves in ways that are super healthy, that lead to like really profound outcomes, both socially, environmentally, and from a return perspective. And we don't think you should have a concession there. You should build things that are in alignment with your values. And so, that's just kind of what I wanted to talk about. We do consider ourselves as part of this wave of impact capitalism. And yeah, just like really excited to hear what you guys are working on and, how we can help you in your journey. So to kick off then, I guess, if anyone in the group currently might want to offer up any businesses that they're working on or any challenges that they're facing. There's a raised hand. Okay.
See Emma with her hand raised.
Okay. So you're allowed to talk. Good.
There we go.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Great. So I'm thinking about an idea where I want to build like a retreat for femmes that could be cis women, it could be trans women, and I want it to be diverse and inclusive and increase accessibility and equity to wellness and to rest. And that might look like some sort of rustic hotel in the woods or a bunch of cabins or things like that. One thing I'm interested in, and I need to raise capital to be able to buy land and to build this. And I'd love to get a grant that is for for-profit businesses, because that's the direction that I'd like to go in. One concern I have, though, is that by taking money or grants, that we're tied to making a lot of profit. And one of my goals is just to create a sustainable business that takes care of employees and offers them a living wage and benefits and takes care of also the community that we exist within. And so I was wondering if there are types of kind of for-profit grants like that is not really about getting massive returns, but is about creating a business that invests in people over profit.
Christine, did you want to talk to that first and then I can go after?
Sure. Yeah, and Emma, I really appreciate your commitment to people over profit and just the vision that you're creating for this company and for this center. And I am most familiar with the nonprofit funding landscape, but my wife runs a for-profit, and so we're often comparing notes on funding modalities. And I will say there are resources out there available, grants and other opportunities that are available for for-profit models. I am a huge believer in paying living wages and in making sure that the values that we're looking to spread and put forward into the world, that those have to be mirrored within our organizations, within our companies, if that's what we're looking to spread. So really encourage you to talk about what you're creating in that, to talk about living wage, to talk about wanting to align your values with the resources that you're taking in. I think those are really important pieces, and there are funders out there who will resonate with your desire for alignment. I will say there, you may have to look a little harder to make sure that alignment is there. We have a similar commitment at SVP. There are companies that we will not accept funds from. But at the end of the day, I believe that because we're fully aligned with our values from the inside out, the resources flow from there. We're able to find the resources we need to achieve the vision that we have.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Peter, what would you say to that?
To just add on to what you were saying, Christine. So as a venture capitalist, we oftentimes get inbound from a variety of different types of companies or people seeking financing. And venture capital is a really specific version of financing. It is geared towards exponential growth. That's kind of like what you want to see. And for us, we're a fan of it at SIC and what we're doing, because we really want to see impact scale really rapidly. And that's why we've chosen the venture model, or sort of harnessing the venture model to invest in the things that matter. There are a variety of different ways in which you can finance a business like yours. Some of that's on the private side, and it's less institutional, like through a venture capital fund or a private equity fund. There are also sort of mission-related investments that you can get from foundations as part of either people's family offices or their personal foundations. And then there's a sort of emerging class of impact investors who are willing to take a concession on returns based on the kind of project that you're building. But it has to be sort of, it's usually in relation to a particular thematic that they're focused on. I would say in the market, it's really still quite fragmented, and being able to understand where you can get that type of financing. There are lots of resources online from like Tonic and different kind of platforms that you can explore. But, I often try to encourage people to find the right kinds of capital partners, particularly at the early stages. And this like hybrid funding between both profit and non-profit, or this slight concessionary element, I don't think even the government has really kept up in creating incentives to have that sort of discreteness, I think, in the financing component. But there is a lot of innovation, I would say, too.
Great, thank you so much. That's really helpful. I appreciate it.
Cool. I see Kelsey. Wow, Kelsey.
Right. And after we hear from Kelsey, I see we also have a couple questions in the chat.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay, good.
Hi.
My name is Kelsey. I am really interested in what it looks like to do social impact work, in the spirit of urgent renovation. From a space that is like, how do you engage with funders in talking radically around what does it look like to have trust and faith in populations that normally are looked at as being risky? Specifically, I work in organizing spaces with, initiatives that are around like centering the wellness of Black folks, and really navigate being, there's just a level of mistrust that exists sometimes when you are organizing for yourself or creating for yourself in populations that are typically underlooked or underfunded. And so my question or thought realm is, what does it look like to approach these funders in a way to have them radically reassess their funding process and getting the word out to organizations they probably would not be outreaching to or working with? I don't know if that came across super clear.
Sure. Yeah, no, I really appreciate this question. And this is something, we see this as part of our role at SVP. We see ourselves as a bridge between the work that's happening on the ground and the philanthropic community. So I will say, one, that all of us should be advocating for funding for initiatives where folks who are impacted by the issues they're working on are the ones leading the way. So at this point in our work, we are only funding initiatives that are led by impacted folks. So whatever the issue is that they're working on, we partner with nonprofits working on a whole range of issues, from criminal justice reform, immigration reform, housing justice. And in each of them, it is our intention that we are investing in leaders who are impacted by that issue, who have lived expertise of it. Because where else can we best find the path forward than through people who have directly experienced it? So I appreciate the work you're doing in that space, and I would say, framing it through that lens, my hope is that there is growing awareness among philanthropy of the importance of lived experience and following the lead of leaders who know firsthand. But I think this framing of lived expertise is really powerful. And so talking about, as you're approaching funders and collaborators, talking about the wisdom that comes from that life experience, from that lived expertise, and the way that that's informing your perspective, not only on the problem you're organizing around, but also the solutions that you see and how you work together in community as a result of that. I see such profoundly meaningful collaboration happening in the organizations that we work with, such generosity and partnership. And, I think emphasizing those assets that the organizations are bringing is really important part of the work. Yeah, Peter, what would you say on that?
Yeah, it's a really difficult topic, and it's something that I've thought about a lot in terms of people that I've worked with in the past, associates that we've had at the firm, and their own experiences, particularly with code switching and understanding also the racialization of professional services, which is a humongous issue, and something that we're still not really dealing with. I think from the venture capital perspective, we're so metrics driven. So the storytelling is a really big component to what we look for when we look at businesses. So for instance, we invested recently in a company that is founded by an African-American lady called Tamara, and it's called Mental Happy. It's actually a tech-enabled group therapy app. So, we basically think that it's nice to be able to talk to people who have actually experienced what you've experienced. And, we are in this massive mental health crisis there. When we looked at the business, did we really care about the founder running it? No, we didn't. We love the idea of the business, and we love the story around it, right? And the charisma around that, and that's something that you also look for as a venture capitalist, is the charisma around the founder, of whether or not you think that they're able to captivate their funding audience for follow-on financing as they're growing and getting the metrics. But ultimately, it's also coming to us within our vernacular. What we want to see are large target markets. We want to see stats around expenditure in certain spaces that you might be working within, and kind of painting the picture from us about what is the market opportunity. You might have seen Shark Tank, or in the UK, we've got Dragon's Den, and there it's a lot of storytelling. You notice the people who tend to win those competitions have the personal story, but then couple it with all of the traction that they've had to date, and all of the KPIs that are kind of associated with that traction. And then our role, we think, at a firm, is then communicating your value to the downstream investors. And I'm going to say something very honest. I'm trying to be way more honest and way more candid in the next few years. We've been through this like last 4 years of governance that's been incredibly dishonest. And the reality is that at the A round, it's really tough for a variety of different people, despite even having the metrics. So a lot of it, we think our role at Social Impact Capital is to be the communication bridge with the people who typically might not fund you. So helping people recognize themselves in you. And I think a lot of it comes down to identity and identification. I'm definitely present as a white man. I'm definitely a gay white man, and I emphasize that, and I make sure to like actually stake my sort of flag in the ground there, because I think that it's also my obligation to allow people who are less fortunate on this pyramid of identity politics to allow more people into the conversation. So that's how we do things at SIC. But I'm not saying that it's not difficult, and there is financing risk down the line. And sometimes, we get worried about downstream financing risk because of the inequities endemic to our own asset class.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Kelsey. Peter, I'm seeing a few questions in the chat. Question, how does someone know they're ready to approach an organization like yours? And with the emergence of things like B Corp, are we seeing a larger shift or growth in impact companies, or has the trend stayed flat in the last few years? So you are better positioned to answer that second question, but would love your take on either or both of those.
Sure. I can start with the approach. In general, there's a lot of unsaid praxis around how you should approach people like us. I have different thoughts about that might not hold true for like the whole venture community. A big dogma there is in the industry is around warm referrals and how you've come to our attention. That is fairly ubiquitous across firms in VC. So, how did you come to meet us? Who referred you? Did you do your diligence on us? Is what you're working on relevant to what we've funded in the past based on the information that's out there? So really doing your homework is super important before you approach somebody like a venture capital firm. Also understanding the partners, because the way these firms are set up is people get really specialist expertise or special areas of focus. So knowing who you want to target within the firm too, which requires a lot of like basically LinkedIn stalking and seeing what people have also talked about. It's a very intensive process, I would say too. It's very time consuming, particularly when you're trying to get your first check. And when you're trying to get the first check, you should understand, like, when you're an institutional VC and you might not have metrics, you have to sort of appreciate that even seed investors are going to be expecting certain traction from you. So really being able to know the kind of capital that you need in the sort of the status or the situation that you find yourself in is super important too. So not approaching firms that you're clearly so far away from receiving that kind of financing. This also is quite a contentious topic because the thing that comes before traditional financing in venture capital in general is friends and family rounds. These friends and family rounds are not made equal. That's definitely for sure, and it's definitely a function of history and geography and demographic wealth and disparities. So make sure like which sort of firm you're going to, who you're talking to, and at what stage they invest, and whether or not you might have the metrics to match those expectations.
Yeah, and Peter, you're speaking also to a question I saw from Rachel in the chat around disparities in funding from a demographic perspective. And I think that's so true in the nonprofit sector as well, that it's not as codified as it is in the for-profit world where there's the friends and family round, but there's so many nonprofits get started from folks who have access to resources from friends and family, or folks who can afford to not take a salary for a year or two while they're getting started. And I think that's why in the nonprofit space, we see a lot of racial disparities in who's leading nonprofits, just generally the percentage of nonprofits that are led by white folks, but also who then is receiving funding. So something we talk a lot about in the philanthropic space that we're trying to kind of spread the word about is so often donors will feel excited about an organization that says, oh, 100% of the funds you give us go directly to community. And while that sounds really great and can sound like a justice perspective, that means they're not investing in their staff. They're not, what's typically called overhead in the nonprofit world is investing in your people and your infrastructure and the basic needs of running an organization. So I think, those are the things that I think folks who have more access to wealth and connections are able to get those needs met outside of their traditional nonprofit stream. And we have to normalize conversations about what it actually costs to run an organization and to invest in your people and your infrastructure. So that's just a little rant. And I think for us, because of that, we're really mindful of those dynamics when we're looking at startup nonprofits. So to answer that question around what we're looking for in readiness, we are early stage investors and partners. So, there are some basic requirements around either having a 501c3 or just having a fiscal sponsor, an umbrella. But for us, we also want to know that the leaders, the organization has done a landscape scan, that they know who else is working in the space. Often we see sometimes well-intentioned folks kind of parachuting into a community and IDing a challenge and saying like, all right, we're gonna solve this without asking the question of who's actually been doing this work. So we want to know that folks are, talking to other organizations, that they've answered the question of what is the problem we're solving for and why does it exist? So we want to know that you've done that analysis and asked why 5 or 6 levels deep. So because we're interested in investing in social justice work, we want to know like what's at the root of this problem. How would you define the real root of it? And finally, we are, as I mentioned earlier, we are looking to invest in folks who have lived expertise of the issue that they're working on. So that's a must for us as well, that the leadership team, at least the majority of folks leading the organization, have a lived experience of the issue that they're tackling. So those are the main pieces for us. And hopefully with any funder you're approaching, we're being pretty transparent about that on our website and in our materials so that you're not spending your time putting forward an application if you're not yet eligible. So I think we try to be pretty clear about that with our different programs. And I think folks are always open to questions if there's something that we're not clear about.
Awesome. Thanks, Christine. And so, Brian, we do want to answer your question. And I do want to answer your question about B Corps and the growth and impact companies. Is this a trend that's flat or is it increased over time? I'd say it's increasing. And that's what gives me a lot of optimism. I'm a willful optimist and a natural pessimist. And what I've seen, sorry, I just sort of think about a cat sitting on a keyboard. It's very, very entertaining. So what I'm seeing is that with second-time entrepreneurs, so you call that people who have sold one of their companies. A lot of those entrepreneurs are now pivoting to startups that are in alignment with you. One company we recently funded is really cool. It sucks carbon out of the atmosphere and creates diamonds. The guy there actually was in a tech company that was at the intersection of fashion and technology and sold it for a couple of $100 million, and then woke up one day after a year of kind of like soul searching to figure out like what did he want to build next. And he also had friends who were some scientists, and were talking about this new technology in carbon capture. And then he also had another friend he had worked with at David Yurman, and they came together and came up with this company. That's just one example. And then I think also there's like a demographics shift. So, 67% of the global population is now millennials and Gen Z. Millennials, like myself, are very demanding people. The reason why I work at Social Impact Capital is because I demand both. I want to make sure that every day I wake up and I think what I do actually matters, and I can look myself in the mirror and feel confident about that and feel good about myself. But at the same time, I want to be remunerative for the fact that my job is basically 24/7. And all the hard work that I put into my portfolio companies and the landscaping that I do, the research that I do, the fundraising that I do. Like I want to, if I'm going to be the ball and chain to my job, I want to feel very, very passionate about what I'm up to, and that's something that I'm seeing amongst my own peer group, but particularly with Gen Z. And actually, it really makes me stoked to see what Gen Z are up to and how they've taken that, you can call it millennial entitlement or whatever it is, right? But that demand for more and how they're translating that into what's possible. I would also say it's to do with generational differences in access to information. So I spend half my life, particularly on the LP side, trying to convince people over the age of 50 who are typically very demographically skewed in a specific way to invest in our fund. That's one of the things that I do. And that the conversation there that I have is a very traditional conversation about returns, risk management, etc. With people who are a little bit younger, who are also interested about the fund, the conversation around impact is way more prevalent and way more the focal point. And so, with Gen Z is super interesting. Gen Z is unlike the older gentlemen that I tend to be chatting to, have had supercomputers in their hands since they're like 7 or 6. And those kids tend to be super, super informed. And I actually am now part of a Gen Z Slack channel. I'm like the creeper who's like sort of, graduated from college and is at the college bar being like, hey guys, what's cool, right? But in many respects, I am so in awe of the up-and-coming generation who now represents a large proportion of the global population who have already started to think about what they want to work on. I had one girl contact me who is in Singapore, who was 16 years old, asking me about what should she dedicate her life to in terms of building. Is it hydrogen-powered planes? Is it, grid efficiency and energy efficiency? And I was like, excuse me? When I was that age, I was thinking what college I wanted to go to, But anyway, so I do think it is a trend that's accelerating for sure.
Great. Well, it looks like it is time for us to wrap already. This time flew by, but really happy to be with you all. And Peter, really, really glad to have the chance to talk with you and learn from you as well.
Yeah, really, really, really wonderful. Thank you so much. And I hope this was helpful for everyone.
Yes, take care, everyone. Feel free to reach out if you have additional questions. You can find my organization at svpla.org if you want to learn more.
Yeah, and you can pester me on Twitter or any social media platform.
All right, take care, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ronald Royale, and I am really honored to be here. I want to simply get things going here with my shared screen. I'm a professor of architecture, so I'm an educator. I have a design studio that called Arrayal San Fratello with my partner, Virginia.